A man who'd just bought a $5 million diamond ring from a store to propose to his fiancée was walking along, completely focused on it. Suddenly, a woman bumped into him, sending the ring flying. Meanwhile, she fell right into his arms. Their eyes met, and it felt strangely magical. Before she could apologize, the man remembered his ring and jumped up to look for it. The ring, as if enchanted, just kept rolling and rolling, showing no signs of stopping. It rolled downstairs, through shops and stalls, all the way to the town square. At that moment, the woman rushed to pick it up and found herself in the middle of a fight. Two groups of people, without seeing her, charged forward. Stuck between them, she was in serious danger of getting trampled. Just in time, the man kicked someone away to protect her, warmly asking if she was hurt. Before she could answer, the two groups stopped fighting and turned their attention to them, looking for trouble. The man grabbed her hand, and they ran, surprisingly fast. The crowd behind them couldn't keep up. When they reached the parking lot, he started scolding her, saying he was exhausted and the ring was gone. But a second later, she held up her hand, grinning, with the ring on her finger. The man was stunned. He'd planned to propose to his girlfriend with it. Seeing it on her, he quickly pulled it off, repeatedly berating her for being so thoughtless. She could only manage a weak smile. He was the chairman of a corporation, handsome, charismatic, wealthy, and incredibly capable. He'd increased the company's profits from $200 million to $2 billion in 5 years. However, as it was a family business, his power was constantly under threat from less competent relatives. Any slip-up could be exploited, costing him everything. His grandmother had urged him to marry and have children to solidify his position. Back home, he called his fiancée overseas, planning a date on a luxury yacht, hoping to propose to her. Meanwhile, the woman with the ring, her name is Nita, was the office drudge. Everyone piled work on her, leaving her no time for lunch, even when she was buying theirs. Her desk was plastered with sticky notes from colleagues, who just dumped tasks on her. Nita was everyone's go-to girl, convenient to use and then discard like trash, with never a thank you. The office jerk had his eye on Nita. He took her to a restaurant, sweet-talked her, and she quickly fell head over heels, seeing him as a prince. She accepted his invitation for a yacht vacation. Little did she know she'd run into the chairman who'd lost his ring, stepped on her glasses, and then, that night, accidentally ended up sleeping with him. Waking up, they realized they were complete strangers. During an awkward struggle, their lips touched again. Before they could explain, two photographers burst in, snapping pictures. They'd planned to blackmail the chairman, but on closer inspection, the dude realized the woman was his sister. He had no choice but to bundle her up and carry her out. The chairman tried to grab their camera. After a chase, the photographer's phone ended up in the water, finally ending the chaotic scene. The chairman, used to being in control, was now a victim of a setup. He demanded to know why Nita had done this to him. She explained she was just on vacation with her boyfriend, took some cold medicine, and woke up to this. He immediately threw her out, saying he never wanted to see her again. Heartbroken, Nita went crying to her boyfriend's room, only to find another woman in his bed, shocking her to her core. He shrugged it off, saying it was just a fling. Already devastated, Nita was crushed. He then started berating her for sleeping with another man. As she tried to explain her feelings for him, the chairman, overhearing from outside, couldn't stand it anymore. He burst in, comforting her and telling her to forget that jerk. He then vowed to make him see her worth. Pawut took her to a makeover, transforming her from head to toe with new clothes, makeup, and hair. She looked beautiful in several outfits, but none impressed him. Finally, she emerged in a black dress, a completely different person. Satisfied, he took her to a casino to confront the jerk, who glared at them with barely concealed rage. After a few hands, the jerk lost everything, not only his own money, but also $1 million he'd borrowed from the casino. His girlfriend, terrified, quickly distanced herself. He pathetically begged Pawut for mercy. Pawut offered him a chance, kneel and apologize to Nita. To everyone's surprise, he did, begging her forgiveness. She softened and accepted. This brought Nita and Pawut closer. He even gave her a lucky chip. She was thrilled, but he had a fiancée. This yacht trip was supposed to be his proposal. She'd postponed it to enter a competition, and they'd parted ways, but their story wasn't over. After their passionate night, Nita was unknowingly pregnant with his child. Her brother still had the compromising video, planning further blackmail. Nita was happily leaving work when a colleague dumped a box of invoices on her, asking her to finish them. Her displeasure was evident. The colleague criticized her for making a fuss over such a small task. Pawut, watching from outside, was furious. He wanted to see how she'd handle it, and was pleased when she refused to work overtime. But the colleague insisted she stay late. Hearing this, Pawut exploded. He stormed in, and in front of everyone, announced that Nita had a prior engagement. Stunned, she watched as he returned the box, and told the staff to stop assigning her extra work. Her time, he declared, belonged to him, and he swept her out of the office. She happily followed. As they talked, Nita suddenly felt nauseous. Could it be related to that night? A growing unease washed over her. Could she be pregnant? In the restroom, remembering her recent irregularities, missed periods, dizziness, and bloating, she was questioned by a pregnant woman. After checking all the symptoms, the woman concluded, "Congratulations, you're probably pregnant." Nita froze, taking a moment to process the news. Outside, Pawut was waiting. He asked if she was okay. She quickly blamed it on food poisoning. Relieved, he smiled. But Nita couldn't stay calm. She geared up for a mission to buy a pregnancy test, leading to an unexpected turn of events. Buying a simple test turned into a nationwide spectacle. Wearing a raincoat, helmet, and mask, disguised like a soldier, she nervously snuck into the pharmacy, looking for her target. At that moment, a news report on TV showed a raincoat-clad, helmet-wearing vandal causing trouble. The pharmacist, seeing Nita, immediately connected her to the description and called the police. Nita rushed into a restroom to take the test. She chose a 99% accurate one and sat on the toilet, waiting. Meanwhile, the police and news crew arrived, ready to film the arrest. Live on air, the police burst in, startling Nita and sending the test flying. They realized it was a misunderstanding. The positive result was clearly visible to Pawut watching outside, leaving him speechless. A reporter asked Nita how she felt about becoming a mother. She just wanted to disappear from this awkward situation. Unplanned pregnancy. Her mother beat her with a stick. Nita cried, refusing to name the father. Her distraught mother yelled, "How can you raise a child alone? Who's the father?" The beating continued despite pleas from bystanders. Under pressure, Nita confessed that the man had a girlfriend and had been kind to her. She'd rather suffer in silence than bother him. He was nearby, listening. Pawut stepped forward, declaring himself the father and accepting any punishment. Despite his status, her mother didn't care and continued the beating until Nita's tearful pleas made her stop. Pawut, true to his word, took the punishment. Nita's mother called his grandmother, demanding responsibility. To her surprise, the grandmother was overjoyed. If the baby was her grandson's, they'd take full responsibility. The wealthy family desperately needed an heir, and this was an unexpected blessing. She rushed over, declaring they wanted the baby as their heir and offering Nita compensation after the birth. Her mother refused. Her daughter wasn't a baby-making machine. Desperate, the grandmother offered marriage. "I'll be blunt. I want a great-grandchild. Name your price. Anything within my power, I'll agree to." Suddenly, everyone on the island showed up. In a tough spot, she listened as Pawut's grandmother promised to save everyone's jobs at the factory. If Nita married Pawut and had his baby, a solution everyone loved. After much deliberation, they agreed. A simple island wedding followed. Her mother gave her a dowry, declaring it the most valuable among her children. Worried that Nita's kindness would prevent her from taking care of herself, she'd have something to sell in emergencies. But before Nita could settle in as a new bride, Pawut handed her divorce papers. He'd discovered that her family was behind the whole baby scheme, fueling his anger and desire for revenge. He saw Nita as a manipulative schemer and ordered his secretary to draw up the agreement, while also ordering the sale of the factory her family depended on, intending to turn it into a waste processing plant to deal with the island's pollution, a clear message to those who'd wronged him. Nita's heart sank when she saw the words divorce agreement. It stated that Pawut would have sole custody of the child, and she'd receive $5 million in child support. She couldn't believe he saw her as a mere incubator. Realizing their loveless connection, she signed but crossed out the $5 million clause. Pawut, seeing the signed papers, felt a pang of guilt and uncertainty. Had he misjudged her? Nita tried to sleep on the sofa, but Pawut insisted she didn't. Later, feeling hungry, he reluctantly made her eggs. Their distance began to shrink, much to his grandmother's disapproval. She scolded him, "It's your first day as a married man. Shouldn't you spend it with your wife?" Ordering him to spend the day with Nita. Reluctantly, he obeyed. They attended a parenting class, leading to an embarrassing moment. During a partner exercise requiring fathers to massage their wives' breasts, Pawut awkwardly faked the motion below Nita's chest. Caught by the instructor, his hand was guided to the correct position. Mortified, Nita faked nausea to escape. Outside, she thanked him for coming. Then genuine nausea hit. He worriedly asked what was wrong. She said that she was hungry. He accused her of faking it for attention. Patiently, she explained it was a pregnancy symptom. He gave her money for food, which she refused despite being broke. She devoured 2 bowls of noodles at a small restaurant. Then, with time to spare, she decided to visit the Welfare Institute to see the children. She happened to run into Taya, an artist who admired her. He watched her draw without taking his eyes off her, and they enjoyed a pleasant conversation, talking about many personal topics. Finally, Taya walked Nita home, where a jealous Pawut happened to see them arrive. Seeing his annoyed expression, she knew he was jealous. She was only 5 minutes late, but he scolded her. Nita introduced Taya to Pawut, saying he was a priest at the Welfare Institute, a very kind and good person. However, the two rivals clashed immediately. "So it's you, the one who asked for a divorce on the first day of marriage." Hearing this, Pawut immediately felt the urge to hit him. He pulled Nita closer and asked why she had told Taya about their private matters. Seeing this, Taya spoke frankly. "Your divorce papers fell in front of me. That's how I know." He also told Pawut not to be jealous, and that if Nita had any problems, she could come to him and report them. Upon hearing this, Pawut hurriedly sent Taya away. "Wait," Taya called out, "Nita's bag." The woman Pawut loved most, his fiancée, suddenly called. But he panicked, unsure whether to answer. His fiancée cheerfully greeted him. Suddenly, Pawut heard a loud scream from the bathroom. Frightened, he hung up and ran towards the sound, leaving his fiancée bewildered. It turned out that the person showering was his wife, Nita, who was sitting on the floor waiting for help. Seeing this, he helped her up, grabbed a dry towel, and told her to wrap it around herself, gently holding Nita in his arms. This intimate gesture made her quite flustered. Pawut tenderly dried Nita's wet hair with the towel, and she stared at him without blinking. They had a child unexpectedly, then began a marriage before love scenario. It seemed they were about to fall in love quickly. They looked at each other for more than 5 minutes, before awkwardly breaking apart. Just moments ago, Pawut was furious with Nita for her outing with Taya. After the bathroom incident, his attitude did a complete 180. He usually let her sleep on the sofa, but tonight, he stubbornly occupied it, insisting Nita take the bed. Waking up early, he snapped unflattering photos of her. One wasn't enough, so he took another selfie with her. Nita suddenly turned, falling against him. Pawut, taking advantage of the pose, smiled and captured an intimate photo. They continued attending the parenting class. Nita assumed he'd be too busy to come, but Pawut, neglecting his chairman duties, showed up, declaring, "The baby will be happier with its father." Their affectionate collaboration on baby clothes created an undeniable spark. Even the instructor couldn't resist snapping a photo. Outside, as they were admiring their creation, they bumped into Pawut's acquaintance, a friend of his ex-girlfriend. He fumbled, unsure how to introduce Nita. Nita quickly claimed to be his colleague, an assistant on a project, and excused herself. Pawut's friend asked her to throw away his unfinished drink. Pawut watched her go, feeling conflicted. Nita sat in the park, happily admiring the baby clothes. She forgot her awkwardness, perhaps used to such situations. Her mother called about a family wedding, hoping she'd bring Pawut. Thinking he'd be busy, Nita told her mother he wouldn't have time, and quickly hung up. Meanwhile, a distracted Pawut couldn't focus at work, Nita filling his thoughts. He called, but she didn't answer, fueling his anxiety. That evening, when he opened the door, not finding her home, he assumed she was with Taya at the orphanage. He opened the door and found her asleep on the sofa, surrounded by parenting books. His anger disappeared. He picked up the baby clothes, grinning. Seeing her sleeping like that, he smiled, feeling genuinely happy. The next morning, when Nita woke up, she was late. She had already agreed to attend the family wedding, so she rushed to get ready. She made the most of her time, and headed there. When she arrived, she discovered that Pawut was also there, and he had shed his chairman persona, dancing and mingling with ordinary people. Her mother sang with him, and the atmosphere was incredibly lively. Nita was delighted to see this, and then she joined in, singing and dancing with everyone. The party ended with joyful laughter. Nita didn't understand why he was there. Pawut immediately asked why she hadn't told him. They had both considered each other, leading to a happy outcome. But there was some unpleasantness to follow. Unbeknownst to Nita, Pawut had planned to destroy the island where her family lived. The woman, who had struggled to conceive the chairman's child, was now determined to have an abortion. She left a note for Pawut and quickly left. When he saw it, his face paled. "I want to get rid of the baby." "What?" He immediately returned home to talk to Nita, only to discover that she had packed her things and was preparing to leave. It turned out that Nita found out Pawut hid from her his plan to sell the island's factory and use it to make dangerous metals. This would basically ruin her family. While someone shy like Nita could put up with his temper, this was the last straw. She argued with him. He wouldn't back down, saying he did nothing wrong. They left angry. Nita decided to go to her mom's. Even though he was mad, Pawut still worried about her being out late. He drove to the bus station, relieved to find her chatting with a friend. He was about to say hi but stopped. He hid in his car and came up with a plan. Figuring she was hungry, he bought all the food from a street vendor for the night and told the guy to give the last 2 orders to any pregnant woman. Nita and her friend fell for it, thrilled with their lucky free dinner. Pawut watched, amused, as their bus showed up. As they were getting on, he rushed over, but Nita's cousin pushed him back. Just as the door was closing, he snuck on. On the bus, they started arguing again about the factory and how it would hurt the islanders. Pawut swore he wouldn't do anything so awful, begging her to believe him. Her family, of course, didn't buy it. Suddenly, the bus jerked. Nita's friend's water broke. She was about to have a baby. With no one on board who knew how to deliver a baby, the chairman, surprisingly, stepped up. A chairman who delivers babies? What a guy! Thanks to their teamwork, the baby was born healthy and everyone was happy. Nita's family thanked him. They also cleared up the mess about Pawut selling the factory to make heavy metals. This chairman wasn't just good at delivering babies, he was great at managing his time, too. Over dinner, they found out they had the same birthday. But Pawut always had someone to celebrate with, while no one remembered Nita's. His birthday buddy was his ex, Kay. Talking about her made Pawut smile, but Nita wasn't mad, just impressed. This year was different. Kay was performing in New York, so Pawut was free to celebrate with Nita. They made plans, but then Kay called, saying she was in Hong Kong for work and could come back for his birthday. Even though he was married to Nita, Pawut kept that a secret and said yes. A co-worker who also competed with Kay heard the call and was happy, planning to mess with Kay. Nita had no clue and was way too excited to sleep, thinking about what to get Pawut. He showed up to cancel their plans, but saw she was about to sell her dowry for his gift. He didn't want to upset her and ruin her excitement, so he kept quiet. Wanting to be a master of his time, splitting it perfectly between 2 women, he planned to celebrate his birthday twice. This man, having just celebrated with his wife, was now off to see another woman. He didn't even try to hide it from Nita, telling her straight up, "My ex, Kae, called last night. She's coming tonight for dinner." Nita was a little bummed. Pawut told her he'd booked a fancy restaurant for her. She could invite anyone she wanted, and he gave her a limitless credit card as a birthday gift. Then he apologized. "No need to be sorry," Nita said, holding back tears. "I'm happy for you, being with the one you love most." Just a bit ago, they had celebrated his birthday. He'd arranged for a dancing bear, then surprised her himself, every detail meticulously planned. The bear even brought in the cake. They blew out the candles together. It was probably Nita's happiest moment, her face beaming. No one had ever done anything like this for her. She put on a brave face, urging Pawut to go and assuring him she was fine, but in the car, she couldn't hold back the tears. Pawut, bouquet in hand, waited for Kay at the hotel. He took off his ring, slipped it into his pocket, and entered their favorite bar, filled with memories. He waited an hour, growing impatient. 2, 3 hours passed. She didn't show. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Furious, he knew this wasn't the first time she'd stood him up. But Kay had an accident. A rival dancer, knowing about their birthday plans, scattered marbles on the stairs. Kay fell, losing consciousness. She woke up in the hospital with a severely injured leg. Meanwhile, Nita and Taya shopped for Pawut's gift. She bought a $475 fountain pen. On the way home, she saw Pawut alone at a bar, downing drinks. Worried, she approached him. She said, "Pawut, happy birthday." Fate had brought them together again. Seeing her smile stirred something within him. A world-famous artist wanted to work with Pawut's company. He thought it was because of his company's potential, but it turned out the artist was interested in his wife. Pawut asked, "You're taking this job because of my wife, aren't you?" Taya replied, "Yes, I'm taking this project because of Nita." Pawut, taken aback by his bluntness, angrily reminded him that Nita was married. Taya said he didn't care. Pawut ended the conversation. Nita went to talk to Taya. He pretended to be an orphanage worker, a brotherly figure, and now he was this famous artist. She was confused. Even more embarrassing, she'd confided in him about her marriage. Taya reassured her it was okay, they could still talk. Pawut, seeing this, rushed over to separate them, asserting his husbandly rights. Taya warned him. If he mistreated Nita and kept chasing his ex, causing her pain, he wouldn't hold back. These words left Pawut speechless. He tried to convince Nita to stop seeing Taya. Nita just smirked at him, making him laugh. Afterward, they went to the supermarket together and bought some necessary baby supplies. The atmosphere was incredibly happy, completely erasing the previous unpleasantness. They even changed into matching mommy-daddy outfits and took pictures. Pawut even promised to let her be his wife forever, because earlier they had signed a contract where Nita would take money and leave after the baby was born. But unexpectedly, this happiness didn't even last a few minutes. Hand in hand, they went to the company. This was the first time he'd brought her to the company, to publicly acknowledge her as his wife. Both their faces were beaming with happiness. But as soon as he turned, Pawut saw his ex-girlfriend. His smile instantly vanished. Kay immediately threw her arms around him. He didn't know what to do and unconsciously let go of his wife's hand. The scene was heartbreaking, shattering Nita's heart. After the hug ended, Kay turned and asked him who the girl behind him was. Pawut didn't know how to respond. Seeing his bewildered expression, Nita said she was his secretary. Kay quickly introduced herself as Pawut's girlfriend. Pawut's head began to ache after hearing this. Nita called him outside to talk. Because they were having a baby, they got married before falling in love and initially had no feelings for each other. But after spending time together, they both developed feelings. Pawut had intended to tell Kay everything, but Nita was just a regular employee. Faced with the chairman's love, she didn't dare to accept it and chose to step back. Pawut went to see Kay and asked her what she was doing back. On his birthday, he waited for her for 5 hours, but she never showed up. He was already disappointed in her, but Kay still had a final blow. She stood up crying, then collapsed to the floor. Seeing this, Pawut rushed to help her up. It turned out that on his birthday, Kay had been in an accident. She had accidentally fallen down the stairs and broken her leg, which is why she couldn't make it to his birthday celebration. She also couldn't continue pursuing her dream of dancing. Seeing her so pitiful, Pawut wavered. He didn't know whether he should tell her the truth or not. Nita, watching from outside as they embraced, quietly closed the door. Tears silently streamed down her face as she looked at their recently hung wedding photo and the matching mommy-daddy outfits. She had imagined a happy life together after the baby was born, the three of them as a family. But now that Kay was back, everything was shattered. Moreover, she was pregnant, and excessive sadness would greatly affect the baby. Nita told Pawut's grandmother that she wanted to go back to her parents' house for a visit, which made his grandmother suspicious. Taya, who liked Nita and knew about Kay's return, immediately wanted to confront Pawut. But just then, Nita's stomach started cramping, and he rushed her to the hospital. He then called Pawut's grandmother and told her about Pawut's continued involvement with Kay. Pawut's grandmother was furious when she heard this. The doctor also spoke to her privately, explaining that Nita's situation was very dangerous. If the pregnant woman was frequently upset, it would greatly endanger the baby. Although both mother and child were safe this time, there was no guarantee for the future. Pawut's grandmother fell into deep thought and then went to Nita's hospital room to talk to her. She scolded Nita for not telling her about this. She had chosen Nita as her granddaughter-in-law, not just because she was carrying Pawut's child, but because she valued Nida's character. Nida was the granddaughter-in-law she had approved of, because she knew she was a good person. "You're a very gentle and kind person, always putting others first. That's why I let you marry Pawut. I won't let anyone hurt my granddaughter-in-law." Meanwhile, Kay woke up in Pawut's villa. She hugged him from behind, wanting to recapture their old feelings, but that was impossible. Pawut sat down, about to tell her directly that he was married, but suddenly there was a knock at the door. It was his grandmother. This man abandoned his pregnant wife to be with his ex-girlfriend. Unexpectedly, his grandmother caught them in the act. As soon as she arrived, she gave him a piece of her mind. Pawut quickly pulled her aside. Kae, seeing this, also ran over to explain, but after just a few words, she completely lost Pawut's grandmother's patience. At that moment, Nida also arrived. She hadn't come to argue but to persuade Pawut's grandmother to go home and avoid escalating the conflict. Seeing her sincere plea, Pawut's grandmother glared at Pawut and then left. But suddenly, Pawut stopped them. He took Nida's hand and walked over to Kay. He told her that the person beside him was his wife. Kay couldn't believe her ears. Distraught, she grabbed Pawut, refusing to accept reality. His grandmother chimed in, saying they were already legally married, and that Nida was more than 2 months pregnant. Kay still refused to believe it, and turned to leave. Pawut, fearing she might do something rash, chased after her. They did have a past together, but it was over. That night, Pawut watched old videos of them together, heartbroken, and cried all night. Nida also wept silently outside. Their three-way relationship was too complicated. Pawut's sister, who had always had her eye on the family's assets, sneaked into his room. After rummaging around, she found Pawut and Nida's marriage contract, a triumphant look on her face. Pawut promised Nida that he would set clear boundaries with Kay. He would prove it at the party the next day. The next day, everyone was invited to the party. Pawut also invited Nida's parents, who were unsure why they were summoned. He chose a suitable outfit for Nida because today was the first time she would appear as the lady of the house. She was stunned by this. But just as everyone took their seats, something unexpected happened. Pawut pulled his wife onto the stage, prepared to announce their marriage and introduce Nida to everyone. 2 people below the stage also began to inform the media, triumphant expressions on their faces. The reporters below started receiving photos of Pawut and Nida's marriage contract. Immediately, they buzzed with excitement, asking him if the marriage contract was real. Pawut didn't understand what was happening until a reporter showed him the photo. He admitted the contract was real, blaming it on a misunderstanding. Everyone below was watching his humiliation. Nida's mother angrily stormed the stage and pulled her daughter away. She berated herself for not seeing his true colors and causing her daughter to suffer. With that, she pulled Nida away. Pawut's grandmother hurried to stop them. Pawut pleaded with her to give him a chance to explain. Nida also spoke up for him, saying she had willingly signed the contract and even proposed it herself. But no one believed this. Nida's mother lightly shoved Pawut, and he fell, unable to get back up. Nida, worried, tried to help him up but was prevented from doing so. After returning home, Nida's family was still hesitant. Initially, they had agreed to let Nida marry Pawut because they needed to rely on his factory for income. But now, their family situation hadn't changed at all. Pawut's family wasn't in turmoil over this because they all depended on Pawut for their livelihood, so they had no right to criticize him. He said, "If anyone's unhappy, they can leave," then stood up and walked away. But he then encountered something terrifying. He suddenly fell down the stairs. Looking at his leg, he realized he might have some incurable disease. It turned out he had ALS, a disease with no cure. Within a few months, his leg muscles would gradually deteriorate to the point of disability, eventually leaving him unable to care for himself and only able to consume liquids. The doctor said there was currently no treatment for this disease. Furthermore, he didn't have much time left, only 2 years. Receiving this devastating news, Pawut thought for a long time. That night, he asked Nida to meet him. She was initially happy, but Pawut acted coldly. He said they didn't need to be together anymore and returned her wedding ring. He also entrusted their unborn child to her. Nida was heartbroken. She thought he wanted the child, but apparently, she was wrong. Pawut wanted to completely end things with her. They parted ways just like that. But then, another unexpected event occurred. Nida was walking down the street, crying, When she suddenly realized she hadn't returned the ring, she turned to go after him, not noticing an oncoming car. She was hit and bleeding profusely. Pawut rushed her to the hospital. The doctor told him that due to the impact and severe blood loss, if they operated, the baby wouldn't survive. Pawut was stunned by this news. They had fought so hard to protect their child. And now this. But Nita's condition was critical, so he had to sign the consent form. His grandmother arrived to comfort him. Nita's mother arrived and slapped him. Pawut could only apologize. At this point, nothing could be changed. They could only hope for Nita's safe recovery. Fortunately, Nita was out of danger. As soon as she woke up, she asked if her baby was okay. Pawut had to tell her the truth. Nita couldn't accept it. Even if you couldn't raise the baby, I could have. Why did you lie to me? What am I going to do without my baby? They hugged each other and wept. Pawut told his grandmother about his breakup with Nita. She was furious, but then he told her about his illness, and she understood his predicament. He didn't want to burden Nita with caring for a disabled person, and he knew his family would try to destroy her. She was too kind and gentle to fight them. Grandmother and grandson embraced, and she said she would do everything she could to find a cure for him. After hearing the news, Taya visited Nita in the hospital. He offered her a way to heal. He wanted her to go to France with him to study art and start a new life, forgetting everything that had happened. After Nita recovered, she went to Pawut's company to return the ring. They parted amicably, agreeing to have no further contact. But as Nita left, Pawut tried to stand up to see her off, but his illness flared up, leaving him without the strength to even stand. He could only tell her he couldn't see her off. To forget the painful memories, Nita went to France with Taya to study art. After 3 years of hard work, she transformed from an insecure girl into a somewhat renowned artist. To express her feelings for the child she lost, she painted a picture. If her child had lived, they would have been 3 years old, sitting on the wooden rocking horse she had made. The painting received much praise when it was displayed at an exhibition. The child's father also happened to see the painting. When he saw it, he remembered his child. After seeing the artist's name, he was stunned. It was his ex-wife. Although they were separated, the loss of their child remained a pain they could never forget. Pawut decided to buy the painting, but when the staff asked for his information, he hesitated. If Nita knew he was the buyer, she definitely wouldn't sell it. So, he pretended to be buying it for his boss. When Nita received news of a buyer, she was surprised because she hadn't intended to sell it. She called Pawut, who pretended to be his boss, David, and texted her. Later, he attended the artist's reception and saw the one thing he least wanted to see, Nita embracing another man intimately. And that man was Taya, the one who had taken her to France. They had supported each other a lot during that time. Taya had helped Nita with her studies and work in France. Their feelings for each other had deepened, but in these 3 years, Nita hadn't married Taya. Seeing their intimacy, Pawut nearly fainted from anger. To prevent them from doing anything inappropriate, he texted Nita as David, asking her to wait for him outside. They didn't meet face to face, but Pawut chatted with her for a long time. Nita had no idea she was pouring her heart out to her ex-husband, disguised as a client. Meanwhile, Pawut's company was facing difficulties. They hadn't made a profit in 2 months. The elders in the family were critical and advised him to step down. Pawut argued that the company needed to innovate its products, not change leadership. He then instructed his vice president to hire a new designer. The vice president couldn't stop praising the new designer, talking about how great she was. Unsurprisingly, the designer was Nita. The vice president certainly knew how to please his boss. Nita would definitely refuse the job. They had parted on bad terms, but at least Pawut had a chance to talk to her. This man was very strange. After divorcing his wife, he started showing up at her mother's house for meals. Even when his mother-in-law chased him away, he wouldn't leave. He'd been doing this for 3 years. His callousness 3 years ago was still fresh in everyone's minds. He had indirectly caused his wife's miscarriage. Just then, Nita came home and saw Pawut. The atmosphere was incredibly awkward. She warned him to stop bothering her mother. They were divorced, so why was he still causing her family to worry? Pawut said she had no right to interfere. He claimed he no longer had feelings for her, but it was clear he was lying. Since Nita's return, he'd been trying every way to get close to her. Not only did he buy her most treasured painting, but he also created a fake identity to talk to her. Looking at his wife's painting, He was deeply moved because the boy in the painting was their lost child. Now, the child lived on through the painting, highlighting his grief. Nita now had a new boyfriend who was planning a surprise for her that night, intending to propose. Nita told her online friend about this and asked him what he thought. She had no idea that the person she chatted with daily was her ex-husband. She asked him, "If a good man in every way proposes to you, what should you do?" Pawut replied that no matter what she chose, he would support her. He hoped she would make the best decision for herself. That evening, Pawut pushed aside all his work and followed Nita in her boyfriend's car, prepared to witness their proposal. Halfway there, traffic came to a standstill. A large screen ahead began playing a video of Nita. Photos and videos Taya had taken of them together. Every moment they shared was captured. Everyone stuck in traffic witnessed this display, including Nita's ex-husband. Finally, Taya proposed. Pawut's heart ached at the sight. People got out of their cars, cheering and applauding Taya. The couple then went to a restaurant and talked for a long time. In the end, Nita didn't accept the proposal but didn't refuse it either. Poor Taya. Before going to bed, she confided in Pawut online. The reason she didn't accept the proposal was that there were things she couldn't forget. The happiest time of her life. Pawut encouraged her to let go of the painful memories and be with the person she loved. Just then, Pawut's grandmother visited Nita and asked her to take on the design position to save the company. The family business was at a critical juncture. Nita, not wanting further entanglement with her ex-husband, initially wasn't inclined to accept the job. But this time, his grandmother personally pleaded for her help. The company was on the verge of collapse. Out of respect for his grandmother, Nita agreed. The next day she went to Pawut's company. He gave her detailed product information and competitor data so she could quickly complete the design. Nita went home and immediately immersed herself in work, even asking the vice president to deliver all other relevant product materials to her house. Seeing this, Pawut cleverly suggested he accompany the vice president. But upon arriving at her door, he saw the last thing he wanted to see, Nita holding Taya's hand, about to go upstairs. Jealousy flared within him. He told her that the company materials were confidential, and she had to come to the office to review them. Nita received the message and had to cancel her plans with Taya. She went to the company to discuss things with Pawut. Working with her ex-husband made her uncomfortable. She stood up, placed a cardboard box on her chair, and sat far away from him. Pawut picked up the box and sat beside her. Suddenly, he confessed that he called her in because he wanted to see her. "I love you." They stared at each other for a long moment, and Nita smiled happily. But this was only Pawut's imagination. In reality, Nita was saying she couldn't focus around him. Ignoring her, Pawut stood up, suggesting they get something to eat. He took her to his mother-in-law's restaurant and ordered a lot of food. Back at the company, they argued because Nita realized the food was from her mother's restaurant. She had told him not to bother her mother anymore. She demanded to know if he had visited her mother again. They started bickering. Just then, Nita's boyfriend arrived to pick her up. They acted intimately in front of Pawut. After the argument and this display of affection, Pawut's weakened body couldn't take it anymore. His consciousness faded. He held on until they left, then collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Each time he had to go to the hospital, he used the excuse of a business trip to the US as a cover. Despite his careful efforts, someone still caught on. The vice president informed Pawut that Nita had completed all her work and was just waiting for his final approval. Pawut sighed, saying that after this collaboration with Nita, he might not see her again. Everyone felt a sense of heaviness upon hearing this. Pawut's grandmother then asked the vice president if it was a mistake to let Nita work at the company. The company's issues had worsened Pawut's illness, but the vice president said that Pawut was undoubtedly happy working with Nita. Unexpectedly, someone overheard this conversation. It was Pawut's father's second wife. If anything happened to Pawut, her son would take over the company. She was sure something was going on. If Pawut's illness was ordinary, why hide it from everyone? She quickly informed Pawut's grandfather's brother, who was waiting for the right opportunity to seize Pawut's position. After a day of rest, Pawut's health recovered somewhat. Nita came to report on her work, and then tried to leave. Pawut became incredibly tense, as this might be their last meeting. "Nita, I was very happy working with you." Nita tried to remain calm, but she was distracted after leaving. She couldn't understand her own feelings. Back home, Pawut stared at the painting, lost in thought. He remembered Nita's new life, his jealousy-induced relapse. Thinking about the meaning of the painting, Nita had once said it was a part of her life. He wondered if he should end everything, completely sever ties with Nita. He took the painting down, intending to return it. Halfway through wrapping it, he started having second thoughts. I'll do everything I can to make you happy. He then pushed aside all other thoughts, finished wrapping the painting, and snuck over to Nita's house. He tried several spots, but wasn't satisfied. Finally, he placed the painting on the steps, where Nita caught him red-handed. This time, Pawut was in trouble. Nita walked forward and saw the painting. She picked it up, thought for a moment, and finally understood everything. The buyer was Pawut, the person she had been confiding in online. She had trusted him so much, thinking she had found someone who understood her and her art, someone she could share her deepest feelings with. It was all a deception. He had played with her feelings again. Pawut tried to explain that it was unintentional, that he simply liked the painting. He apologized for not knowing its significance to her. To me, it's just a regular painting. Get out! Just get out. They hurt each other. Taya witnessed this scene. He warned Pawut to stay away from his girlfriend or face the consequences. Pawut replied that from today on, he wouldn't have the chance to see Nita again anyway. After returning home, Taya comforted Nita. She wanted to go back to France. She thought she had forgotten Pawut and started a new life. But apparently, she was wrong. She had never forgotten him. Hearing this, Taya felt so depressed, as he was the one who was truly hurt the most. This girl suddenly realized her ex-husband might be an idiot. Someone had slipped a voice recorder into Nita's bag, with a note saying not to open it. Thanks to this device, she discovered a shocking secret her ex-husband had kept hidden for 3 years. Inside was a will. If he died from all his assets would go to his wife, Nita. The company would be temporarily managed by his grandmother, who would train his younger brother as the new heir. Every year, they had to celebrate Nita's birthday, and were forbidden from telling her about his illness. Finally, Nita understood everything. He had a terminal illness and didn't want to burden her. She immediately sought out a lawyer to confirm this. The lawyer had secretly placed the recorder in Nita's bag, unable to bear his boss's foolish behavior any longer, silently sacrificing for someone who was completely oblivious. Seeing that he couldn't hide it any longer, the vice president told Nita everything. Pawut's situation was critical. Initially, it was just muscle deterioration in his legs, but now his respiratory system was also failing. He could die at any moment. That's why he had been so cold to her, hoping she would find someone better and live a happy life. Pawut's grandmother also arrived to say goodbye to Nita before her flight to France. She told Nita that she and Pawut were happy to see her starting a new life. But Nita was now hesitant, unsure what to do. Just then, Taya arrived, saying it was time to go to the airport. After a moment of thought, Nita went with Taya, tears streaming down her face, as she thought of Pawut. Seeing her like this, Taya felt terrible. He had accidentally learned about Pawut's illness the night before. Pawut's ex-girlfriend had let it slip. Taya had thought Pawut was a jerk, but he turned out to be so devoted. He also wanted Nita to be happy, so he decided to take her to see Pawut. Taya took her hand, saying she didn't need to explain. He understood everything. Nita could only thank him. When they arrived at the company, the vice president said Pawut had gone to a press conference. He didn't know what Pawut planned to announce. It turned out that during a meeting the previous day, Pawut's grandfather's brother had barged in and revealed his illness to everyone, demanding he step down as chairman. Pawut and his grandmother negotiated with him. When he pressed him, Pawut remained calm, saying he had evidence of his collusion with outsiders and warned him not to push him too far. He backed down slightly, but Pawut knew that continuing to hide his illness would only lead to more problems. So, he called his vice president and lawyer to draft a new will, addressing the issues of his assets and the company, making proper arrangements for Nita. He then informed them about the press conference. Both were stunned, unsure what he intended to announce. At the press conference, Pawut announced his terminal illness and his resignation from the company. His grandfather's brother wore a triumphant smirk. When Nita stepped forward to stop him, refusing to let him resign, his grandfather's brother immediately said she wasn't a company employee and had no right to speak. But Nita and Pawut's argument suddenly turned into a public display of affection. Everyone around them was speechless, unexpectedly witnessing such a lovey-dovey scene. Good thing they didn't eat too much this morning, or they'd be throwing up right now. After separating, they continued to bicker. Nita asked him to finally admit he still loved her. Pawut still refused. At this point, I really wanted to slap him. He was infuriating. Nita stormed off. Once outside, Pawut finally spoke from the heart. He wanted her to have the best life possible, urging her to settle in France with Taya. But this wasn't what Nita wanted. She accused him of never considering her feelings. Do you know how much I suffered without you? I want you to be happy, to have a good life. But my happiness is being with you. At that moment, overwhelmed with emotion, Pawut collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. Nita also confessed her feelings to Taya. He was the most pitiful character in this whole drama, from the first episode to the last, never able to win Nita's heart. She still couldn't forget Pawut. No matter what, she wanted to be with him until the very end. Taya said that as long as she was happy, it was okay. So touching. Nita hugged him one last time as a thank you. Meanwhile, Pawut remained unconscious. Nita stayed by his side. He heard her calling him in his dreams and woke up a few minutes later. After a thorough examination, the doctor discovered he didn't have ALS, but another unnamed illness. While incurable, it wasn't life-threatening and wouldn't worsen. With proper care and rest, he could return to a normal life. 3 years of suffering, all a misunderstanding. Pawut didn't have a terminal illness. The screenwriter really knew how to mess with the audience. Of course, it ended happily, with everyone gathered for a celebratory party. And that's the end of the drama. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel for more.